Yes, this is part 2, the second set of questions. Phase 2, the component architecture, questions 11 to 25. Okay, beautiful. So now this is the second set, 11 to 25. In short, the 6 components are about the human being and all its possible, probable range of manifestations. Question number 11. Which of the 6 components is the most misunderstood by the ordinary? Ordinary here meaning average kind of so-called intelligence, average kind of capability to think, average kind of power of attention, power of observation, power of conceptualization, and various skills and abilities and things like that. So-called ordinary. Many people understand what is ordinary, and there is opposite of that, the extraordinary. Anyway, the question here is, which of the 6 components is the most misunderstood? I would say the language component is the most misunderstood. Language is the most taken for granted or misunderstood. Misunderstood in the sense that everybody thinks that because they can talk, they are good at language, or they have mastered that tool of language. And my interviews and observation of more than 20,000 people over the last 24 years, I have clearly realized that a great lot of people are not at all competent in language. To such an extent that I designed a concept called creative language control in my training of select people. Language is the only one tool for the so-called human beings. If you want to communicate, to impress somebody, if you want to lead someone, if you want to inspire and liberate and lead and etc., you cannot enter into the heart and change the gears like you repair and service an automobile engine. So language is the only one tool, and that is perhaps the most taken for granted. If you clearly observe even the global situation, most of the conflicts, not only interpersonal conflicts between 2 or 3 people, but group conflicts or national level conflicts, international conflicts, they are all created and maintained and sustained by language. What else? The so-called diplomatic relationships. Why even at the international level, global level, they are not able to understand that the entire problems are basically rooted in the mismanagement of language. Just remember what the supreme genius William Shakespeare wrote in his marvelous treatise Macbeth. Life is a tale told by an idiot. Tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, of course signifying nothing. So tale told, he is implying that it is all kind of languages. Interplay of language. I have done a lot of research on language to such an extent that I declare in my book that every subject is nothing but a language. And so-called I think, therefore I am. Everybody is capable of talking. And the so-called leaders, whether political leaders or religious leaders or business leaders or other local leaders, they are all in that so-called leadership position by their so-called capability to use language in order to influence or impress or inspire or liberate or on the other hand manipulate the population or the audience. Okay? So language is the most misunderstood. In the sense that individuals do not understand that they are the victims of the language of the powerful controlling agencies. Now, coming to the individual's own relationship with the inner world, when he or she is alone, it is the language that is going on through the mind, so-called stream of consciousness, which is controlling the emotions and self-images and the moods, and it only creates the state of depression or worry or anxiety or tension. They are all mediated by language. So, out of the 6 components, language is the least understood. Because they can talk, they think that they are masters of language. And the majority people are majority because of their language only. And that's why, for example, here in the context of Gemini or using artificial intelligence support for various work for organizations. The critical problem is what? They are not able to do or devise a proper prompt. Okay? Entire AI is operating by language, and most people want support in preparing documents or preparing whatever kind of written materials. People are not capable of devising a question properly to be put into the chat box of whatever Gemini and such tools. That itself is the evidence that those who talk so beautifully, give presentations, talk to public on the stage and so on and so forth, they are not able to design the proper syntax on the significant question they want to ask. So that is the finest evidence. So they connect it with thinking. Okay, those who are even capable of thinking, they don't have the proper conceptualization. That is putting their own ideas and experiences and perceptions and feelings and thoughts into appropriate language. And that's the power of all. It's the power of the poets and writers of all kinds. Okay, so that's it. Now, question number 12. Is expression a result of the self or a reaction to the environment? Its components are expressions, responses, behaviors, actions, relationships, and language. So expression is the primary, the minimum. Even at the embryonic level, many mothers told me that they used to communicate or they used to talk to their embryos, and when they talk, the embryos would make a movement. That is the level of expression beginning. And as soon as the embryo comes out, of course, all those who observed a child can easily understand that every child has his or her unique expression. Okay? So what is the question? Yeah, is expression a result of the self or a reaction to the environment? And of course, it is a expression is of that self or that operating central agent inside the embryo or in the infant or the baby or the adult. It is a result from the self. And it can have as a reaction to the environment also, of course. For example, little baby is lying down and the mother comes, that's a part of the environment. The mother body comes and the expression of the child differs. Or you move a colorful sounding toy, there is a reaction. Or rather, that expression of the baby to a sounding toy is a reaction to a stimuli or a thing in the environment. Yes. Question number 13. How does one cleanse their responses from historical baggage? Oh, that's a kind of a therapeutic kind of a question. A great lot of people are carrying their baggage of the history of responses they made to the world outside and feedback results of those responses to the world outside. Somebody happens to respond to somebody with, let's say, anger or aggression, and that person rebounds and attacks back, and a person feels bad about it and thinks that I should not have done that. And by the time 18, 90, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 50, 60, 70, an individual is carrying actually the feedback responses of the responses they made. Because every human being has expression, response, etc. Okay? You make an expression, you make a response, and there is a response back from the other person. Oh, yeah, yes. So, as I said in the case of existence is a game of language. Now, the second level, existence is a massive interplay of responses of people. One response of one person and a resultant reactive or response of the other person. It can go in a huge range of things. Very gentle response of high to response of an attack or a murder or a rape or a killing or whatever. So international responses. So anyway, the question is about in India. How does one cleanse? That means get rid of or wash out the baggage of responses. Okay, that is they have to go for what I call a creativity therapy. or they have to go to a therapist, or they have to go to a guru, they have to do some meditation and all those things. And a great lot of people go to the ashrams and meditate and pray and all those things, and they visit the temples and mosques and churches and all that in order to cleansing a moment or experience. You have to do a massive survey, how individuals do, what to cleanse their historical baggage. A lot of people may do many things. Ideally, one should develop that clear understanding of existence. So from my perspective, they have to detach their mind and focus on the creature, the jivi, and through that focus on the nature process, and realize that in whatever responses or thoughts or worries they are suffering from, actually the creature is absolutely oblivious to that. That's what I call the Jiva Yoga, focus on the creature. That's a fine way which I have done, which even I do, and which I make many of the trainees do also. Now, question number 14. What is the default behavior of a person who lacks linkage perception? So, default behavior, that's the behavior of an ordinary person, the majority. Because I define linkage perception as the basic requirement for creative thinking or creative perception or creativity in any work. Creativity, even I define that it is nothing but perceiving linkages of varied kinds and ranges of objects and things and situations and contexts and languages and so on and so forth. So the ones who do not have a clear, at least a minimum level of linkage perception, they are all ordinary, and if it is below a certain point, they are all, let us say, mentally retarded people. A mentally retarded child or person will not see any linkages. Alright? Okay? They will not understand. A so-called and innocent person may not see any linkage. If somebody is making a comment on them, they will not even realize that it was a comment of insult or humiliation to them. That will be the default behavior. Mediocre or below mediocre. Or ordinary. Ordinary people see linkages because out of their experience. They know that fire is whatever is dangerous out of experience. So they have linkaged it. Or they have linkage about human behaviors, human expressions, human responses, human ways of doing things, human relationships. A great majority of people see a lot of linkages, no doubt about that. But that is at the mediocre level, which everybody can see. So therefore, we call mediocre people and all that just as a name. They are very ordinary. Otherwise, they would have tried wonderful things about that. If they saw the linkage of their behavior, their existence as a human condition, they would have tried for higher order creativity or enlightenment or satori or fulfillment or to become what Abraham Maslow, a great creativity researcher or psychologist, says. Everybody would have tried to become a fully functional person. But they don't see the linkages. They don't see the linkages of wonder in their own expressions and responses and behaviors and etc. etc. Even in my training program of creativity or genius in self, I have to work hard, logically explain and prove the so-called creativity or the geniusness of individuals. It takes about 3 days, 5 days, 10 days, 15 days, 20 days, 30 days of interaction. What I am trying to do is to provide evidences of the rudimentary projections of creativity or genius or that order of their intellect. And they are not agreeing. They are not able to believe that linkage because of various other linkages. How can I be? And so on and so forth. That's a very important question actually. How people suffer from the lack of linkage perception and why they suffer from certain linkage perception also. Like the medical industry, they are advertising. If there is a headache, go to the doctor. If there is a stomachache, go to the doctor. As of now, everybody is a victim of medical industry. Now, what all illnesses? So now they are all seeing linkages, basically of their illnesses, and they don't see a medical mafia is operating. For example, it's not my idea, people say so. Great doctors talking about that. The so-called people who lack linkage perception, they are so-called geniuses in seeing certain other linkages also. So it is an individually different, differential combination of linkage perception. Like for example, a genius He sees the linkages of subtle, intangible, deeper realities of the world or existence or whatever his field, and he does not see the linkage that he has to buy vegetables for home. So that's a very complex issue. Individual has to be interviewed and studied in that level, connected with the same thing, so-called historical baggage. So default behavior of a person who lacks a linkage perception in general is very ordinary, very average, in general. Now question number 15. In action or activity, that is the expression, response, behavior, action, the fourth component. In action activity, what is the sweet spot of maximum output? Actually, I don't know what Gemini means by sweet spot, but I understand, okay. And action activity, let us forget about the word sweet spot, I don't know that. Maximum output. That is when an individual is very inspired, very dedicated, and also very competent in doing a certain action or activity. I don't understand what is the context of sweet spot there, okay. That means something positive. The question is, when an individual is capable of maximum output. That is when, as I said, somebody is inspired, dedicated and competent. Maximum output meaning what? The quantity or the quality or the power? So in an organization or in a manufacturing industry level context, people should be very dedicated, they should have a sense of ownership and they should be working with full attention to details and they have to be definitely competent. Then there will be maximum output. Then 16. How does the manner and style function as a protective shield for the genius? So therefore, before that, you have to know what Gemini means by a protective shield. Okay, the concept is very clear. First of all, I consider myself a genius in a retrospective understanding. A genius is not bothered whether he or she is a genius. That is an observer's statement. A genius individual is doing whatever he or she does in a firm, correct, complete, elegant way. And somebody says he is a genius, that's all. A genius does not feel, there is no feeling can be named a genius anyway. So the question is clear, protective shield. In my perspective, a genius does not need any protective shield. In my level of genius, a genius is nothing but an expression of the nature process with which he or she is tuned. He is protected by the nature process. There is no conscious design of manner or style to do something and things like that. He is just a carefree, flying, eccentric guy. It is the majority who plans a lot of things to protect themselves, arranging homes and protective gears and things like that. They have manners and styles. I don't know whether a real genius is ever concerned about a protective shield and things like that. Protective shield from whom? From human beings. They don't most of the time interact with human beings. And if the human beings do something, they just smile and agree. Like what Jesus did. Okay, or what Socrates did. Socrates was poisoned by the criminal collective mindsets led by the clergies and clerics of that time. He was administered poison. Some liquid of the leaves of a tree or plant called a hemlock. Finally, the soldier came to give him the poison in his jail room. And he said, don't worry. The person was very shivering, very worried, very hesitant to offer that poison to a wonderful human being. He said, don't worry, give it to me. He doesn't care about protective shield. He doesn't care even about dressing or food or anything. I know, because that's why I lived and that's why I live even now. Protective shield. All right. Now, question number 17. Why is language control the ultimate editing tool of reality? Of course, language control, they have put it in bold. That is not my concept. My concept is much, much above that. Language control is there with a great lot of people. They control their languages. At least when a guy on the road confronting a police, he will control his language. Before the authority in the office, before the boss, everybody is controlling their language in the sense that they don't talk what they want to talk. or even if they talk, there's a difference. They are all able to control language. Definitely, almost everybody is controlling language in one way or the other, depending upon the context and requirements and settings and the kind of people with whom they talk. I am talking about creative language control. That is much different level. It's about the creative way. That means in a most effective way, in a most firm, correct, complete, elegant way. That level of creative language control is an editing tool of reality, meaning the reality perceived like a great poet or a great writer in fiction and short story and other things, or a great screenplay writer or a great theater director, etc. Their data is from the real life, okay? Reality only. They cannot bring in from an infinite vacuum. They are taking the signals of events or episodes or situations to the so-called reality, and then they edit it in a certain unique way. That really becomes a story or poetry or a screenplay. Otherwise it is just a journalistic reporting. And that is ultimately creative language control in the form of writing or in the form of oration, or what most of the political leaders are really capable of. That's why they have become political leaders, not by education. They are controlling societies. How? By just their language, their creative language control. I would say every politician, even local politician in a village, even he, I have observed, they have immense capacity of creative language control. They know what to talk to whom, in which way, etc., etc. 18. Yeah, what you call? Can you have 5 components functioning perfectly if the 6th is blocked? That's a very creative question. Blocked in what way, I don't know. If somebody is not allowed to talk, alright, or if somebody does not have a properly developed language, or somebody who is so dumb. Dumb people, they do wonderful. In fact, I would say dumb people or deaf people are much wonderful human beings. They are not much corrupted because they are not victims of the language trap, what I call the language trap. Their functions, the other functions, expression and responses and behaviors and actions and relationships can function perfectly in the sense that more or less okay, appropriately, approximately okay, definitely. And anybody can see that. In general, statistically, they may have relatively perfect functioning of the 5 components vis-a-vis those who are really talking like anybody else on the road is talking. Now, 19. Yeah. Engine is my concept. Perhaps, to my knowledge, I am the first one to use the concept of engine to refer to human functions. In my book, I have written engines of intellect. I don't just use the word, because I investigated the root meaning of the word engine. The root meaning of the word engine, which I checked, even many engineers do not know. The root meaning of the word engine is very surprisingly talent, T-A-L-E-N-T. I felt so thrilled to think about that genius who coined the word engine. Knowing fully the root meaning of that is talent. Brilliant. Anyway, steering meaning guiding or directing the flow of the result of an engine, like 2 engines of intellect: attention, perception, observation, thinking, conceptualization, imagination, visualization, etc. I call the engines of intellect. Some of them will work as steering also. That means, for example, thinking is an engine. Operating in almost anybody, they are also steering it. They think about certain things. Tomorrow there is no work, so how can I manage work for tomorrow? So they are steering, they are driving their thinking about in that direction. That is done by their attention, which is another engine. That thinking engine itself may steer its own function also. That's what is happening in stream of consciousness. A thought goes on its own kind of a flow, despite the will of individual. An individual does not want to think about something, and precisely to his dismay, that thought goes in the same unpleasant way. So that means the engine of thinking is generating thoughts as an engine of thinking, and it is steering the direction of that thoughts in a certain direction also. So steering also is an engine. Even in a car, automobile, I would say, even steering is an engine. in the sense that it has a gearbox, it controls the tire rod ends and turns the wheel in certain direction. That's also an engine. But we have named it as a steering. That's all. Gearbox also is an engine in the sense that, in that way. But normally engine some other meaning. That's why this question also. So in the human case or in every component, the engine can be a steering also. Both way. Now, 20. How does a functional disability manifest within the 6 components? Wow, really a highly creative question. Very creative question. Very, it can be asked only with a clear understanding of the 6 components. Yeah. Functional disability. That means an individual is not able to manifest one or more of the components in a capable way. For example, let us say at the old age, the hands do not move properly, or the legs do not move properly, or due to some anomalies, some of the systems do not function properly, let us say so. And that functional disability, let us say, of the body will definitely influence or delimit the possibilities of doing an action or an activity, which can affect other components like the responses, the behaviors, the relationships, and even the language. Because that person feels whatever normally somebody would feel when the limbs are not working properly, or when there is some kind of physical illnesses. One way to look at it. Or somebody is not capable of expressing his or her feelings properly. I mean, expressions are not proper, or expressions are not really coming out. Like some people are very dull and morbid and very, very reticent in expressing themselves. They control their responses, or control their expressions. Some people think that I should not show tenderness towards other people, like some of the senior managers in the old public sector companies. They restrict their expressions. Of course, the so-called police people in India, there are a lot of them control their expressions, or they pretend different kind of expressions. But they are doing it. Their body is doing it. Their creatures are doing it. As a result, after a long time, they will become dull and frozen kind of people. Okay? So almost anybody would feel a little bit affected by the expressions of a policeman, a normal policeman in India, in general. Okay? So that expression would restrict their own possible, probable responses to a person. So it's a very brilliant question. It has a lot of implications for so-called neurotic conditions or behavioral problems, etc. You can think the other way. A functional competency can also affect the 6 components. Because somebody who is really good in doing something, a good film actor or a good sportsman or a good singer, so somebody with the competency in musical instruments. I used to tell my trainees, for example, if you see a guy in the airport, brown hair and very unique dressing and things like that, you just look at him. He will smile at you. If you look at other people, they will not smile back and they may look a little bit irritated. But you can confidently go to a man who is dressed in let us say, in an eccentric way. And most of the time that person would be a musician or a guitarist or a tablaist or a drum player and things like that. So I am talking about the opposite of functional disability. A lot of people look morbid. You walk on the road and look at the expressions of the people. In a bus station, you look at the expressions of the people. There you can see the expressions. Okay? They are not responding. They are just standing there. Look at the people sitting or walking, for example, in the airport or sitting in an airplane. Observe people. Then you will see how I would say morbid they are, how closed they are. They are all waiting for a so-called friend to respond properly. When you go to a government office, You will only rarely see a smiling face at you. For example, once I was standing in a queue in an electricity office to pay the bill. So I'm standing in the queue, that guy is not looking at all. He just doesn't look at that face of the person there. If it is a female, he may just have a glance. And he is sitting there dryly. And then his friend comes there at the back of the queue, let's say so. He just, hi, hello, how are you? Hi. See? And that is, you can see even in many of the so-called shows. I have seen in so-called Coimbatore and in my village, they look so dull. They have no appearance of friendliness on their face. So that will affect one or more of the 6 components of the other person also. Okay? So a functional disability can manifest within the 6 components, and one or more of the components get affected, and that affects other components also. Like I behave in a certain way to a person, okay, and after that, indirect feedback from him, then onwards my expressions towards him, my responses towards him, or my responses in general get a little bit delimited or get biased or get corrupted. For example, a father scolds the son, and the son is affected emotionally, let us say so. And it gets a feedback into the father, and father then gets affected, and his expressions and responses become delimited, whereas the son goes out cool. So it has a lot of implications. Okay. How the 6 components are not manifesting properly, as I said in some other answers, ideally the 6 components should be very elegant and wonderful. Actually, why not? Some time back there was a campaign under the leadership of the genius guy named Kurian, known as Amal Kurian. So he was referring to the drivers or people in Delhi, in India. Nobody smiles at other people. As a researcher, sometimes I would try to have a small smile when I look at a stranger. Very rarely I got a smile back. Very rarely. So because 6 components it is my idea. They are like 6 spokes of a wheel, like a bullock cart wheel, and that wheel rolls in that 6 components. If they are not proper, it will be like what you call an ill-shaped wheel, which cannot roll beautifully on a terrain. So it is beautiful. Question number 20. How does functional disability manifest within the 6 components? And for example, when you observe people, if they are not expressed properly, if they do not respond properly, if they do not behave properly, if they do not act properly, if they do not relate properly, if they do not talk properly, you don't feel bad. There is some functional disability within. It could be organic. For example, sorry to say, people with terrible constipation, their expressions and responses, etc., would be very much delimited. I feel so inspired to talk a lot about this. I appreciate the real brilliance. No doubt, Gemini is very creative. Then, in a next level, we can talk about the so-called mental blocks. Dr. Pradeepan Khandwala's concept of mental blocks. The 7 mental blocks can independently create a disability or apparent disability in expressions or responses or behaviors, etc. For example, somebody is capable of singing, okay, or somebody is capable of giving a speech, but on the stage he is shivering. So that so-called mind can be a cause of that, independent cause to prevent or to bias or to mismanage the 6 components. So then that functional disability is with the so-called mind. So-called mind. 21. What is the manner and style of a person in a state of total flow? Wow. Total flow, I think they mean the Taoic flow or the concept of flow proposed by a great researcher by the name Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. He has written a book by the name of Flow, and according to him, the entire creativity is nothing but flow. and Tao, Chinese Tao. The entire Chinese root philosophy is about Tao, T-A-O, Tao. Tao itself is a kind of totality only. A person in that good flow, in the Taoistic sense or in the Zen sense, or even in the flow with the one's own energy field, the environment and flow of life itself, or what Alan Watts called the water flow, water course of life, then the manner and style is corresponding to that. They will be very gentle, they will be very monk-like or rishi-like. So that will be the manner and style. So somebody can observe those monks perhaps in the Tibetan monasteries or other monasteries or in the Japanese Zen monasteries. They are all current manifestation level, or they can read the literature about great individuals, great human beings. So if you look at Jesus as a person of total flow, or Buddha as a person of total flow, then their manner and style, perhaps anyone can easily guess, anyone with the familiarity of their history. And there are many individuals, I have seen at least hundreds of them, in tune, in flow, in good flow with existence. They live very simply and they talk very simple. They don't interact much. They don't have any history of unnecessary conflicts with people. They they live by their own business. They mind their business. That's all. 22. How do you re-architect a component that has been damaged by trauma? Oh, that's a question. It's a psychotherapy kind of a question. Actually, out of my research in creativity, I have developed exclusively different kind of a psychotherapy which I call creativity therapy. Whether damaged by trauma or by personal errors and mistakes in life and all that, clearly a method, and that method has been developed by me also in which I name creativity therapy. So that's all I would say now. I say it is possible, and how is this an ordinary question? Actually speaking, how a tea is cooked, that can be written in a recipe book, but reading that nobody can become a great cook. How is always to be shown, to be demonstrated. The other person should act or do according to the instructions of the demonstrator. So that is what creativity therapy also. So even if I can say there is no point in explaining how to re-architect any of the components of expressions or responses or behaviors or actions or relationships or language problem here. Whatever be the reason. There is no difference if it is caused by a trauma. And there may be a little bit of other linkages that can be easily solved. Now, which I have done, which my trainees do. Okay. Now, 23. Is there a seventh component? Is there a seventh component that we aren't ready to name it? And there is another 3 more components, which I don't want to name it, there is no point in naming it. 6 is the basic, and there could be combinations of that. And they are all at the genius and enlightened level, like sensing the invisible, understanding the language of the birds and the plants, even the power to disappear and reappear. So those kind of components are there. They have basically no correlation with the other 6, especially the 6th one, but there is certain correlation also. There are no watertight compartment difference between them. So there are 7th and 8th and the 9th component basically. In fact, all those 6 components need a training. And every home, every parent is doing the training knowingly or unknowingly to children. That's why every new generation is developing whatever they do, whatever they express, etc. But that is normal training. In select homes, wonderful parents, they consciously train, like what the father of Richard Feynman did, or like what the father of Zakir Hussain did. But anyway, that's a beautiful question. 24. How does the normal distribution guru attempt to flatten the 6 components? Definitely in variations. Somebody may not be good at expressing an emotion, etc., but he or she may be good in language, or the vice versa. Somebody may be great at talking, but not at all good in doing. Somebody talking meaning, or language meaning, language here meaning all the knowings. They are all in language. That sixth component of language is very heavy. That is the component we can call in general all the knowing, almost all the intelligence, the data. Artificial intelligence is operating by language only as of now. It doesn't get the dimension of the component for expressions or responses or behaviors or relationships, etc. It operates entirely by language. So, if you look at the curve of six components of AI, it will be kind of what you call highly skewed. If it is a graph, all the 5, 0, and the sixth one, let us say percentage 100%. And of course, individual differences. What is individual difference basically? Individual difference is a centralmost concern for psychology. No two individuals are the same. There is a differential distribution of these six components. And why should it be flattened? And let it be like that. It can be flattened for a given individual if he or she wants that. Equally competent in language, equally competent in ways of relating with people, in ways of doing and ways of behavior, ways of responses and ways of expression. Some great people are like that there, of course. Like say Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther King or Rabindranath Tagore or J. Krishnamurti or Vivekananda, and that level of people only I know. I have only great models. When there are great models, I think we should be always talking about them. So their six components are sort of flattened. And the syntax of that question is very slippery. How does the normal distribution curve attempt to flatten the six components? The curve cannot do anything. Focus is understood, is clear. But the syntax is very weak. And last question of this lot, 25th question. What is it? Yeah. What is the signature of a fully integrated human entity? Signature is, he will be firm. The question is fully integrated human entity. It is like Abraham Maslow said, the fully functioning individual, or a highly creative individual, or kind of an enlightened guy, a kind of a person with a Zen mind of no mind, something like that. The signature is what? There I take my own principles or principles of nature process I have discovered. What? Firm, correct, complete, elegant and Taoic. That's all. A fully integrated human entity, his or her expressions and responses and behaviors and ways of doing, or rather, let us say, such a person's ways of expressions, ways of responses, ways of behaviors, ways of doing things, ways of relating with the people and entities and things and phenomena and with oneself, and ways of language will have almost all the attributes of firmness, correctness, completeness, elegance and Tao. As that in every minute, every moment and every movement and every entity on planet Earth or perhaps in the other parts of the universe. That's all. So, thank you for listening to this section, this part of the 100 questions very graciously provided to me by the collective intelligence of Gemini. Once again, thank you, Gemini.